Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Coffee Hour. All right, where we're just going to be going over some market news. A lot of news in definitely a lot of news in the space. All right, I honestly have not had a whole lot of time to catch up on everything. There was just way too much to go over. And also, honestly, I'm running on probably about 3 hours of sleep. So we're going to try to power through this and get to it because I think a lot of it is interesting. All right. So we're going to be talking a lot about Greenland, Trump, of course, because, you know, he's pretty pivotal in all this. You guys have felt it today with the market. We were just in this slide down, and then all of a sudden we had this massive spike. All right. So we're going to be covering that. We're going to be talking a little bit about SpaceX. We'll be looking at a couple clips here and there. A lot of this is going to be ad hoc. Okay. So I'm making it up as I go because I just did not have enough time to go through the newsreels and the sources to actually, just pick the best ones. So anyways, guys, this should be a pretty fun episode. If you guys have any questions, you guys can always drop it in the chat. You guys know I like chopping it up with you guys. All right, so right now in the chat, I see Victor Sank. Hey, man, welcome back. Skeptic is always here. Thank you. We'll be covering two ETFs probably towards the end of the stream. If you guys want to, drop in any other ETFs, we can take a look. All right, doesn't have to be just broad-based thematic ETFs. Could be sector-based ETFs. Maybe you have an idea for a stock you want to throw in the chat, please do. If you have an idea for, maybe high yield ETFs as well, drop them into the chat. Always happy to take a look at those towards the end. And we have Real Evil Duck, who is quite the evilest of the ducks. All right, so let's get into it, guys. Let me switch my views here. Boop. All right, so we're going to head over here. All right, so S&P 500, we are looking good today, but we did have a very, very nasty start. All right, we had this really, not here, but we had this pretty nasty dip in the S&P 500 to start with, and that was because we were talking about acquiring Greenland. All the leftover stuff was still in the air. No one was really sure what was going to happen, and then Trump landed in Davos, and he made a speech, and he's basically talking about why Greenland was so important to the United States, but also he was putting basically NATO on notice. He was definitely putting NATO on notice and saying like, hey, you guys don't have to give it to us, but we will remember. And I think that was a really sharp shot across the bow for all of them. So, but anyways, neither here nor there. Let's continue on. So the S&P 500 doing all right. We had Bitcoin starting to make its way up again. All right. So we had a really nasty sell off. All right. From 95K all the way down to about, what do we have here? About 87,000. All right. So if anyone was able to pick up any Bitcoin around that time, congratulations. And then it looks like we had this really nice, spike up, and it's kind of just been flat for a little bit, or for the last day. So, going to continue monitoring that because, Bitcoin is a good tailwind to look at, especially if you're looking to see, what's happening, in terms of like money flows, inflows, risk on environment, that type of stuff. So Bitcoin's usually a pretty good indicator. The other indicator that tells us what investors are thinking of is gold. All right. And gold actually did really well today. All right. Up 1.46% over the last 5 days. It's just been climbing higher. Right. This was the uncertainty on a Friday. Right. And then over the weekend, people got to digest what was actually happening. And then, here comes a market open, and then just, gold's been doing pretty well. Again, I hold a pretty sizable position in my own personal portfolio to gold, but it's more so because of the debasement trades, you guys know. But it's also a really good hedge against political unrest, geopolitical unrest, right? Or just the chaos that goes in international relations. Okay, fear and greed index, we're sitting at neutral. We can go either which way. We don't know, right? Actually, I forgot to include the VIX in this. Let's just take a quick look at the VIX and see what we're hovering at. I don't think that's current because I saw the VIX at like 19 when I woke up this morning. So let me quickly double check that because I would hate to have an incorrect number. Let's take a look at the VIX. Let's see if this is going to be updated. Oh, I guess this is right. Okay, so again, VIX is like a a proxy for the fear and greed index. So it'll usually tell us what's going on, or like how what the sentiment is. It looks like it's starting to come down, which is a good thing. All right, so probably crisis averted. We're not going to have some crazy downward trend, right? Downward trend on the S&P 500. Are we VIX gang now? Skeptic, I'm definitely not the VIX gang. I use it as an indicator. Actually, it's one of the indicators I check daily. I usually use that plus a couple other things and plug it into one of my GPT models, and it spits out kind of like like a market sentiment type of report. But yeah, I check the VIX probably daily, because I learned from the last time something crazy happened, back here, and these are good telltale signs, right, of what's about to happen. So that's why I monitor the VIX. And I mean, you can even go as far back as April, and you can see when April, the tariff stuff, like peak fear right here, happened, right? This was the buildup February to March, and then we had finally the tariffs, right? So we saw that peak fear, and then we had of course the sell-off. We'll come back to COPEX probably towards the end of the stream. I don't have any real opinions about COPEX. I think I've seen the ticker. I'm not sure if that's a spot price. I mean, whatever. We'll take a look, and then we'll get into the news. All right, whatever. We'll do this real quick, guys. Oh, copper miners. I mean, you got to think what is so important about copper right now. There's some narratives out there saying that there's an overabundance of copper, scrap copper, things like that. But if you're a believer in kind of, again, I hate to keep bringing it up, but the AI trade, data center build out, I mean, they're going to need a lot of copper. Where are they going to get that copper from, right? So I think having a copper exposure, in my opinion, is probably a prudent thing. How large of an exposure is left, for you to decide. But yeah, copper miners, I do have a small, very, very small position in a copper miners ETF myself. All right, so just for full transparency. Okay, so let's move on. Fear and greed, we already covered that. So we have SpaceX racing for IPO as Elon Musk eyes space AI data centers. Okay, as crazy as this sounds, it looks like it's actually going to be happening probably in the near future. I don't know, maybe a couple of years, 5 years, 10 years. It wouldn't be insane because, not too long ago in the distant past, people were saying that having a bunch of satellites in space, for Starlink was not, a good idea, because you have all the telcos, you have Crown Castle Inc., you have American Tower, you have SBAC Communications. So you have all these big, large, telecom infrastructure REITs that are out there that lease the space for, I'm drawing blanks here, guys. Sorry, it's been a long time since I covered the REIT sector. But you have these big antennas out there. Towers. Thank you. Cell towers. That's what it was. Cell towers. So you have these big cell towers out there, and people were like, oh, well, low entry orbit satellites, LEOs, for internet connectivity is not going to be feasible, right? Because you have all of these cell towers throughout the whole world. So what's the point, right? But as we see now, Starlink is doing very well. And as a matter of fact, it has been used in a national security sense, or even in warfare. And we can see that it's useful just for the everyday person who might be traveling or living in very rural areas. Elon Musk had turned on Starlink for natural disaster areas and things like that. So again, it looks like, maybe it wasn't such a bad idea. But for any of the Elon fans out there, we do have Elon Musk, again, rocket company SpaceX, is bolstering its efforts to go public amid a rush by companies to build AI data centers and put them in space. The Wall Street Journal reported the idea to put data centers for AI computing into space has prompted skepticism from many engineers because of the technical challenges posed by building solar-powered AI data centers that circle Earth. What does an AI data center in space look like? Is it one massive structure, like the International Space Station, or is it just a bunch of bigger satellites? All right, I don't know. I haven't looked into it that deeply. It is it is fascinating. We're just going to be adding more junk. China's entering the race now. China wants to also put in a bunch of, space internet satellites out there. So again, maybe that is the next move for internet, right? Maybe that is the next move. However, the ideas continue to gain traction, and Musk has become obsessed with the idea of SpaceX being the first to do it. The report added, citing people with the knowledge of the matter. Such a feat would be difficult to attempt without billions of dollars in capital from an IPO. So interesting stuff happening for SpaceX. Interesting stuff happening for Elon Musk. I don't know, guys. Again, for me personally, I'm not versed enough to know what these data centers could even look like. And I mean, Elon Musk, he does kind of go off on the fringe of ideas. He wanted to put a building on an asteroid and have it, float around Earth. I don't know, guys. Like some of the things he says is just really off his rocker. But I mean, he's a smart guy. He does have several companies under his belt that are doing exceptionally well. So, maybe this is something. If the market wants it, the market's going to get it. So let's move on. We also have Besant. So yesterday we covered Deutsche Bank, basically saying that they were going to sell off U.S. T-bills, right? That they were going to have this leverage over the United States. And it turns out that was pretty much just one analyst from Deutsche Bank. There was no others in that entire area. No other analyst saying this, but it was just one analyst. And it appears that, media took that and then just continued to run with it, continue to spark, more fear, doom and gloom out there in investor land. Because Scott Bessent actually addressed this at Davos, which was honestly pretty cool in my opinion. But, he did address this. I couldn't find the clip for it. But Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent revealed Wednesday that Deutsche Bank's chief executive personally called to distance the German lender from a controversial analyst report suggesting European investors might sell off American assets. So right after that news came out, there was, one pension fund that from Denmark, if I'm not mistaken, we covered it yesterday, that actually did sell about 100 million worth of T-bills. And they were saying, oh no, this has nothing to do with Greenland. These T-bills are underperforming. We kind of don't trust, the U.S. Dollar anymore, and them making good on their promise to pay, pay off on the debt. So maybe that was, a sign to come, but it looks like it really wasn't, right? It looks like none of the other countries are really going to follow through with that. This notion that Europeans would be selling U.S. assets came from a single analyst at Deutsche Bank. Bessent said the CEO of Deutsche Bank called to say that the bank does not stand by that analyst report. So, hey, we can sleep better at night knowing that the EU is not going to just offload $8 trillion worth of equities and T-bills. Who else we got in the chat? Oh, we got Super Straight Guy. Hey, welcome back. Welcome back. All right, so we're going to just watch a couple clips that I found. Again, I haven't had a whole lot of time to go through and find some of the better clips. I was looking at them last night. There's no save function, unfortunately, that I know of on a phone, so I couldn't really save the clips that I did find. But there's a lot of good stuff coming from Davos yesterday, for sure, or today, for your guys' time, for sure, for Greenland, Trump, and kind of the inner workings, the inner thought process of what's going on. So let's just take a look. Again, we cover the macro news, right? We cover geopolitics because all of that stuff affects the stock market, right? That is why we cover it. That is why we have to at least understand it and what's going on. Do we have to react to every little signal, right? Or every little, noise that comes out? No, we don't have to react, but it is a good data point to keep, right? Okay, so let's listen in on this. So this is live from Davos. President Donald Trump announces framework for the future deal with Greenland. So that was the big one. Let's see. Actually, you know what? Let me see. Because I had another clip. Oh, maybe that's it right there. You know what? Yeah, this has been front loaded. Let me scroll back here. Okay. So, anyways, so he put out a tweet or post or whatever. So Donald Trump attended Davos. He gave his speech, right? It was about an hour and 15, 20 minutes. So he gave his speech. basically saying why they need Greenland. And then they went on and you basically talked up all of his achievements in perfect Trump fashion, talked about why he's so great. And then, again, started talking about the United States, right? And kind of the direction the United States is heading into. I caught probably the last 30 minutes of the speech. I didn't get to catch the first half, and I still need to go back and listen to it. But anyways, based upon a very productive meeting that I have had with the Secretary General of NATO, Mark Rutte, we have formed the framework of a future deal with respect to Greenland and, in fact, the entire Arctic region. The solution, if consummated, will be a great one for the United States of America and all NATO nations. Based upon this understanding, I will not be imposing the tariffs that were scheduled to go in effect February 1st. All right, so that was tariffs on partners who had sent troops to Greenland as a way of deterring American aggression, right, or American use of force. Additional discussions are being held concerning the Golden Dome as it pertains to Greenland. We're going to be talking about a little bit about the Golden Dome because there is some partners in there that are traded on the stock exchange in case you guys are interested, right? I'll just say it right now. One of them is Palantir. They were announced as one of the front runners for the Golden Dome project, but we'll cover that a little later. Further information will be made available as discussions progress. Vice President J.D. Vance, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, and various others as needed will be responsible for the negotiations. So that post came out, and then the stock market just climbed like crazy, right? Taking back all those losses, maybe a little bit more gains, right? So they did pretty well. Anyone who's a little worried, looks like we were able to at least climb or claw our way back up. All right, guys, moving on. Brian Armstrong, right? CEO for Coinbase, he was also at Davos. So was NVIDIA's Jensen Huang, who I really want to see that entire speech. He's basically talking up AI and the future of AI, the adoption and everything else. He was actually speaking with Larry Fink, CEO of BlackRock, who's also there. I am trying to look for some of those clips because I definitely want to hear what Larry Fink had to say. We actually have one clip of Larry Fink talking about tokenization that we'll see here in just a second. So this could be really bullish for just crypto in general, specifically probably Ethereum in my opinion. But anyways, let's listen to Coinbase CEO talking his thoughts on Bitcoin and kind of the world banks, right? If you're not a Bitcoin person, you don't fully understand Bitcoin. I think this is at least a good starting point. Let's see.
Bitcoin doesn't have a money printer. The supply is fixed, and people will go to it in times of uncertainty, kind of like they did with gold. Sorry to say that I trust more independent central banks with a democratic mandate than private issuers of Bitcoin, which have a very useful role. But Bitcoin is a decentralized protocol. There's actually no issuer of it. So that's in the sense that central banks have independence. Bitcoin is even more independent. There's no country or company or individual who controls it in the world. And so anyway, I think it's a healthy competition because if people can decide which one they trust more, and I think it's actually the greatest accountability mechanism.
You could just see him right here, just like ready to shoot back at this guy. Yeah, this was interesting, right? There's still central banks out there that don't trust Bitcoin. And it's interesting that that Bitcoin would even be brought up at the World Economic Forum, right? There was news, and if I can find it real quick, I'll pull it up. But there was news that the United States is going to continue adding seized Bitcoin to the strategic reserve. In the past, they usually sold it off, right? They sold it off at an auction or something. But now they're just going to be adding any seized crypto or any seized Bitcoin to the U.S. strategic reserve. Specifically for that article, they were talking about two of these, I guess, scam groups that they ended up getting their basically their Bitcoin confiscated by the U.S. government. So I don't think this had anything to do with Venezuela per se, because again, Venezuela supposedly still holds about 600,000 Bitcoin somewhere, right? So if we hear news that they actually got the keys from Maduro and are actually able to extract that Bitcoin and then add it to the strategic reserve, that would be absolutely insane, right? That'd be absolutely insane. But if the United States has no intention of ever selling that Bitcoin, right, for no reason whatsoever, again, that's just more Bitcoin that's being held, right, on top of all the ETF inflows, on top of all the retail investors, on top of, traders, who are trading Bitcoin. Again, I mean, there's a lot of tailwind for Bitcoin. There's a lot of reasons to own it if you believe in Bitcoin and if you don't believe in fiat currency any longer. But that also goes the same with gold. All right. Okay. So moving on, we also had Larry Fink, all right, speaking here, and he's talking about tokenization, right? He's talking about tokenization, specifically, in the finance sector. So let's listen in.
I think the movement towards tokenization, decimalization is necessary. It's ironic that we see two emerging countries leading the world in decimalization, in the tokenization and digitization of their currency. That's Brazil and India. I think we need to move very rapidly to doing that. We would be reducing fees. We would do more democratization by reducing more fees if we had all investments on a tokenized platform that you could move from a tokenized money market fund to equities and bonds and back and forth. We have one common blockchain. We can reduce corruption. So I would argue that yes, we have more dependencies on maybe one blockchain, which we could all talk about. But that being said, the activities are probably processed and more secure than ever. I think the movement.
So what do you guys think? What does the chat think? Right. Big deal. And he mentioned two countries, Brazil and India. And guess who Brazil and India are part of? They're part of BRICS, right? And BRICS is moving away from, or they've already moved off the dollar, right? They're moving away from the US dollar. So again, interesting to know that. Interesting things are happening in the finance space, and we just don't see it, right? We just don't see it every single day. We don't know that these conversations are happening in the background. There's speculation here and there. There's a little bit of news articles here and there, right? But blockchain technology is going to be adopted by, finance, by TradFi. And, that's why I'm very bullish on something like a BMNR. I hate to bring them up. Speaking of BMNR, and again, I wish I had the article. It's coming to my mind right now. Again, last minute prep, right, guys? Because I don't pre-plan a lot of this stuff. I just go through my news cycles. But BMNR actually had the vote pass. So they had the vote pass. So they will be, diluting shares, right? Basically, what is it, 100 for one, I think. So they will be, or the vote pass. So that's a good thing, in my opinion, for BMNR and for us as shareholders, if you're a believer in BMNR's mission, right, and what they will be doing. But anyways, again, TradFi, finance institutions, large players, everybody is moving onto the Ethereum blockchain. Right, they're moving on to the Ethereum blockchain. We've covered this before in another stream, where they're, you have JP Morgan, you have Bank of America, you have Citigroup, you have Societe Generale, you have a ton of these large players moving onto the blockchain, or plans to move onto the blockchain, and then have usually their own stable coins. Right now, why would that be bullish for Ethereum? That is honestly a good question, because again, I revert back to the Lynn Alden kind of example, where she was saying, there could be $14-15 trillion traded on the NASDAQ every single day, but it doesn't mean that the NASDAQ is worth, $14 or $15 trillion, right? So that's kind of the same idea for Ethereum. So how would the Ethereum coin become more, more valuable? Because that's what we're really betting on when you're betting on BMNR, right? You're betting on the Ethereum coin becoming more valuable. So I still haven't found that connection yet. Me personally, I have not found what that connection is. My thesis is still intact for BMNR. Actually, after the Mr. Beast announcement that they're investing 200 million in there, I'm still very bullish on BMNR. I can kind of see why it makes sense for BMNR to do that. Again, it's if you really look at it as another company as an example, they're trying to be like a Berkshire Hathaway almost, right? They're going to have their moonshots. They're going to have their community outreach. They're going to have their Maven project, and they're going to help, Wall Street, move onto the blockchains, right? So maybe there's some consulting or some type of niche there for them. So again, still bullish on Ethereum, aside from just them buying Ethereum, putting it on their balance sheet, and then staking it, right? Like, I thought that was probably the best way forward, but hey, the management, I believe in the management team, obviously. So, all right, moving on. So this was the biggest news. We kind of already covered it, so I don't have to go through the whole article for you guys. But Trump says he reached Greenland deal framework with NATO, backs off European tariffs. Okay, so now hopefully Europe is not going to strike us with tariffs, because they were talking about exiting the deal that was made in July, right? Way back in last year in July, they were talking about halting that whole deal. Which would destroy that big trade agreement that everybody had worked on, right, within the Trump administration. So NATO says, or Europe says, hey, we're gonna neg on that agreement. And then this news dropped that Trump says he reached a Greenland deal framework with NATO, and then backed off actually putting additional tariffs on European countries. So we'll see what comes of that. I still have not seen any updated news regarding what Europe is going to do. Scott Besson, we covered this on yesterday's stream, basically saying to these countries, not to react so quickly, take a breath. This is the same thing that happened in April, where, some countries were reacting real quick, saying that they're going to, start doing their own tariffs. They're going to start doing this and that. And it created like peak fear, peak uncertainty, which honestly is Donald Trump's probably signature move at this point. Create strategic uncertainty, right? Create the problem and then sell the solution. So instead of invading Greenland, now he's talking about, okay, well, give us a couple pockets of Greenland and let's place a couple missile sites there, Golden Dome, that type of deal. And by the way, let us mine Greenland, right? All of that happened. So it's absolutely crazy. So here's the initial details, and this is coming from the Kobesi letter. Initial details on the Trump-Greenland deal have emerged. Involve small pockets of land for the U.S., probably assuming that this is where they're going to put missile sites or something else. The U.S. is involved in Greenland's mineral rights. Again, we covered this several times, that Greenland was very important for critical minerals. Excuse me. Duration of the deal has an indefinite timeline, so that means this deal will go on forever until one of the partners negs on this. Designed to block Russian influence in Greenland, U.S. Golden Dome system will be involved. Opens door to U.S.-backed infrastructure investment. All right. I don't know if there's oil in Greenland. I don't know if anyone in the chat is smarter than me and can, say whether that is or isn't, but that'd also be very interesting if, there is oil over there or around there and they open that up, right? So now you're really extracting natural resources from that country. But of course, this isn't going to happen overnight, right? This isn't going to happen tomorrow. It takes a lot of, obviously, money, investment into, not only getting miners over there, right? Building the mines, getting it all up there. Evil Duck had posted something really interesting in the Discord saying what it actually takes to mine anything in Greenland, because Greenland doesn't exactly have large power infrastructure, large roads, or anything of the sort, or even large ports, right? So it's going to be interesting. It's not going to happen within the next 6 months. Definitely not the next year. It's going to be it's probably going to take at least a couple of years for everything to really start working out. But I would keep an eye on who's going to be over there, right? The companies who are going to be over there, the public companies, things like that. So I was just, again, something interesting, something I found on X. Okay, so let's listen in to Trump talk about this deal with CNBC.
Well, we have a concept of a deal. I think it's going to be a very good deal for the United States, also for them. And we're going to work together on something having to do with the Arctic as a whole, but also Greenland. And it has to do with the security, great security, strong security, and other things.
The market, 600 points, getting back a lot of some of the nervousness we had in the last couple of days. The tariffs are off. Nothing happens on February 1st.
No, we took that off because it looks like we have pretty much a concept of a deal.
a deal of ownership, a deal?
Well, it's a little bit complex, but we'll explain it down the line. But the Secretary General of NATO and I and some other people were talking, and it's a kind of a deal that I wanted to be able to make.
Where does Denmark, did they weigh in on what they want, what they would agree to?
Well, I assume they did, because he very much represents, he's a strong leader. Mark, you know Mark Rutte. And he, I assume he's been speaking to them. He's been speaking to all of them.
Are mineral rights involved? Is ownership involved? Did the Golden Dome sway people?
I don't want to say yet, but...
The Golden Dome was very compelling today when you talked about that.
Yeah, the Golden Dome, and they're going to be involved in the Golden Dome. And they're going to be involved in mineral rights, and so are we.
It's not specific enough to know at this point how long this lasts, whether it's... Forever.
It'll be forever.
For Greenland at this point.
Yeah. Forever.
That's staggering.
That's better than a 99-year.
This is what, 2 hours after.
It's better than the Obama deal with the famous Iran nuclear deal with a 9-year.
Man, it's so crazy, like how fast things are happening. It's just crazy how fast things are happening. It's we are 22 days. Well, for me, I'm 22 days. For you guys on the East Coast and in the United States, Western side, it's 21 days. But we are 22 days into January, first month of the year. And already we've had two massive things happen. One, we've had, we basically the United States went in and snatched a sitting president from a country, right? Venezuela. And now the United States is getting basically Greenland, right? Essentially getting Greenland, all within the span of 1 month. Man, 2026 is going to be lit, guys. 2026 is going to be lit, man. All right. So in the chat, I see Dividend Sith. Hey, man, welcome back. And yes, execute Order 66, as they say. We're actually going to cover something regarding buying the dip. All right, now, me personally, I didn't buy really anything during this dip. I'm still waiting for the big one to really dump or to really happen. Again, I don't know what that catalyst was going to be. I was thinking that this was going to be the catalyst, in all honesty. And it was because if you look at the S&P 500, I'm not a technical analyst here, but if you're looking at the S&P 500, it's starting to hit this wedge pattern, or it already has hit this wedge pattern, and it's looking for confirmation to the upside or confirmation to going down, right? There's some price targets out there that the S&P 500 is going to have this really nasty drop down to like almost close to April Liberation Day levels, but again, sometimes you got to take that with a grain of salt. Anyways, let's listen in real quick. Actually, do I have another article? Yeah. So anyways, we already know this. Trump says Greenland framework with NATO involves mineral rights for the United States. All right. So we can put that to rest. But we have something for Buy the Dip from our man, Tom Lee. So let's listen in on this. I have not watched this video yet, so this is all fresh to me.
Fund Strats. Tom Lee. Tom, it's great to have you react to the president and what's happening in the market. So a framework to a deal, no force, all is well now for the bulls?
Scott, I think so. I'd say on Monday morning before the open, I think investors were very concerned about Greenland and what's happened in Japan. And they thought of 2025 when it took 8 weeks for stocks to find their low, down 20%. So I think there was a lot of fear. So today's news really does do a lot to diffuse a lot of that anxiety, and I think it's wise to buy that dip.
Yeah, as part of this, of course, the president also saying no tariffs on Europe on February 1st, and that's what really upset the market. Are you still looking, though, Tom, as positive as you might sound for a bear market sometime around mid-year?
That's right, Scott. I think we have been pretty clear that we think that there is going to be a mid-year hiccup. It could be around policy or it could be around the new Fed being challenged. But that's coming from us markets being at a higher level. And I think one of the mistakes people make whenever they hear that commentary is they think it means to go to cash. Now, as you know, we've advised to stay invested and to buy the dip. But yes, There is a lot of good
Mark Invest
in
Cathie Wood
2026, but we do have a lot that's already been priced in because of 3 good years of market gains.
What dip would you be buying specifically?
Well, for instance, I would be buying the dip on companies that have good earnings visibility or a structural reason to be long, because those that got sold yesterday, for instance, they're still the same great company. They were just 10% cheaper. I mean, to me, that's a stock I'd want to buy. The names I'd want to avoid are companies that are in the bullseye of White House policy, because we know last year the White House picked winners and losers. You know, it created problems for healthcare and consulting companies. This year it's credit card issuers, you know, institutional buyers of single-family homes, and it's, you know, some countries too. So I think that's the stocks to avoid, but I think fundamentally strong names, you still want to buy the dip.
I mean, it's complicated, though. You say that. You don't know who's in the so-called bullseye next. That's one of the problems.
100%. You're right, because if the White House decides that there's a company or a series of companies that are creating problems for Americans right now, whether it's credit card bills or electricity bills, you know, there could be action. As you know, one of the potential, quote, risks is data centers and their consumption of electricity. So that is something to watch.
I mean, you're gonna say, don't buy the home builders, because what if the home builders, he doesn't like home builders building homes and charging the prices they're charging? I'm just saying it's a slippery slope to start going down, where, in your words, you have an administration picking winners and losers. It certainly complicates the picture a bit, doesn't it?
It does, Scott. I mean, every administration picks winners and losers. You know, Tom Block, our policy strategist, has pointed out that's what Washington's habit is, that they tend to pick winners and losers. But we do have a White House that is quite ambitious. They've accomplished a lot, but they're trying to accomplish a lot. So you're right, that's the risk. And perhaps one of these is enough of a tipping point to cause a broader pullback in markets. I mean, that's another possibility for why we'd have a drawdown that feels like a bear market.
But you still feel as though whatever upset we see or feel is going to be reversed and we end up having a pretty strong year?
Yes. You know, in 2025, that 20% decline did not lead to a recession. And as we pointed out, that since 1950, waterfall declines that are now followed by a recession, and particularly a VIX hitting 60, have been symmetric recoveries. So I think if we have a, 6-week drawdown, investors shouldn't sell, because unless they're great at timing, we can recover all of that loss within 6 weeks. And we are expecting a really strong finish for the year. So
Tom,
I think it's just...
Where does the Fed factor in to all of this? You heard the president with his obvious criticism of the current chair, Jay Powell, and some commentary on where the next chair may come from. How much does this matter to your outlook?
It's important, Scott. The Federal Reserve is the single most important entity in the world, and its independence is incredibly important because markets respect the Fed and they actually fear the Fed. So the independence matters. I think the process, and Steve Reisman made some good points, I think we're at odds increasing that it's a Fed that'll be respected because the multiple things taking place at the Fed now kind of limit how the White House can proceed to pick the new Fed chair. And actually, that's probably a good thing.
So there you guys have it. Tom Lee, of course, bullish for the end of the year for the stock market. But he also has a belief, and his technical analyst that he kind of leans on is Mark. Guys, I'm so sorry. I'm barely awake here. Mark. I forget his name. Mark somebody. I follow him. But anyways, basically Mark and Tom Lee, Cathie Wood came out and said also that this year, 2026, is going to be some type of, pullback, drawdown, correction, hiccup, bump in the road, whatever you want to call it. And a lot of it is going to have to do with the AI trade, right? Because last year, the AI trade was just all the rage. And you had Palantir, NVIDIA, a lot of the hyperscalers. You could throw a dart at any technology company and they're just going to go up, right? Any semiconductor company, they were all pretty much doing well. Even Intel Even Intel has come back from the dead, right? If you guys could take a look real quick, I mean, why not? Let's just take a quick look at Intel's chart. But even Intel had a crazy run up. And it's just hard to believe because, you know, I was looking at Intel and just like, this is not a real thing. Like Intel is a dead company. It's not going to do anything. And just look at this crazy run up, 149%. Right. And this was after the United States had, you know, taken a stake in Intel, which, you know, again, is a whole other thing, whether you like that or don't like that. But, you know, yeah, you know, Intel is also there, right? So there was that one bet on, I think, Wall Street Bets where this guy like bet his whole like inheritance or took his grandma's money or something. And he ended up putting like, you know, I think it was 150,000 or something rather into Intel, and he's just let it ride. So I don't know what he's sitting at now, but I'm sure he's pretty comfortable. So yeah, I mean, it looks like, you know, just last year was this crazy run up on everything related to AI. Didn't matter what it was, right? It could just be news that you had the, you know, NVIDIA partnering with so-and-so, or OpenAI partnering with so-and-so, or, you know, these people selling chips or developing an AI chip like Qualcomm. You know, just everyone was in on this AI thing. Even Micron, you know, Micron Technologies, we covered them just briefly on one of the streams. You know, they had a crazy run up. Look, 255% for 1 year, right? PE was like a 7. It's just a lot of these companies had these crazy run ups, right? So again, Cathie Woods, Tom Lee and Mark, I can't remember his name right now. They're, you know, kind of saying that, yeah, this crazy run up that we had, because we had three 20% years, right, for the S&P 500, 3 of them. So to continue this bull market, you know, you know, history and all that stuff, usually there has to be something, right? There has to be something that happens that's going to drive the market down. So we'll see if that comes to fruition later this year. We have Cathie Woods. Speaking of Cathie Woods, right? We also have Cathie Woods. I really want to cover David Sachs, who is also at Davos, but it's like a 15-minute clip. I want to be respectful of your guys' time, but it is a 15-minute clip of David Sachs, who's the Trump administration's, you know, crypto czar. He was at Davos and he was speaking, you know, so he did do an interview with CNBC. I will probably watch that myself off stream, so I don't waste your guys' time. But let's listen to what Cathie Woods had to say. All right.
Is releasing her big ideas for 2026 today and is here first to share them along with her thoughts on the markets. It's great to welcome you back to Halftime. Cathie, nice to see you.
Thank you, Scott. Great to see you. Thank you so much.
So I've read through your outlook in which you lay out some specific themes that you like, but let me...
And guys, just real quick, just think about this for a brief second, right? We have so much information at our fingertips. You have YouTube, right? Like 10, 20 years ago, you would not be listening to these interviews, right? You wouldn't even be able to see what was happening at Davos. You'd probably have to read it in a magazine or a newspaper. Nowadays, you can see them live, like actually speaking. You get to get into the minds of these people. And whether you hate them or love them or like them or indifferent, right? These are people who are in very important positions or who built you know, massive funds or, you know, who are involved in the market every single day. So I'm not saying follow them 100%, but it is interesting just to take what they have to say as a data point, right? As a data point for your own investing theses, whether you're investing in the AI trade or not, or maybe you're, you know, like with the Greenland thing, you know, maybe you start looking at mineral mining companies and beyond that, you know, if you're worried about the Fed printing $38 trillion, maybe you might start looking at gold, right? Or something else. But I just wanted to make that point because, again, there is a lot of information out there. A lot of it can be noise versus actual signal, but it is still a good data point to keep in your mind, right? It is still something to think about because when everyone starts talking about, you know, this crash that could potentially happen, and you have some, you know, really smart people out there that you know, are in the markets every single day, you know, I don't know. I would just like to hear what they have to say and come to my own conclusion. All right. So anyways, let's press play on this.
Let me just ask you, you call the U.S. economy a coiled spring for many reasons. I'm wondering how you think that translates into what the markets may do this year.
Yes, well, we think that we've been through a rolling recession. We've seen it in housing, manufacturing, small business, consumer sentiment, and that thanks to tax cuts, big refunds this first quarter, but corporate tax cuts as well, so big investment cycle ahead, as well as deregulation, which I think is highly underestimated in terms of its impact, and lower interest rates and lower inflation, sounds like Goldilocks, that is all going to play out this year and be very good for the financial markets.
You know, I thought it was interesting in reading your outlook when you talk about multiples, which are at great debate, I think, right now, whether 22 times is too rich for stocks, whether you will get multiple compression, but earnings are going to be strong enough that it's not going to matter, if you want to use that word, to the market. You, in fact, do think that multiples will compress because of productivity gains, but that stocks are still going to return double digits this year, and that some of the best bull markets have happened in times of multiple compression. Is that correct?
That is correct. We saw it in the 90s. Big multiple compression, and the market did extremely well. We saw it in the early 2000s, and even ARK in 2017 and 18. Our multiples compressed significantly, and we outperformed the markets significantly in 2017, a big up market. But even in 2018, that was a down market, and we were up, which many people didn't expect.
It's curious to me, I think, that of your 5 themes for 2026, AI is at the top of the list. But you do not own any large positions in any of the hyperscalers. You have 1% positions in Meta and NVIDIA and Amazon, and we can get into NVIDIA specifically in a moment because there are things I want to ask you about that. But why is that? If AI is such a big theme of yours, why don't you have bigger stakes in any of the so-called hyperscalers?
Right. So one of the reasons is we think the shareholder base of those companies is changing and will continue to change because shareholders in the last cycle who got used to huge cash flow and cash positions building, very little M&A because the FTC had shut down M&A. All of that is changing with AI now and with a new FTC. So we're seeing huge capital spending and returns on invested capital probably coming down for a while. And the shareholder base in those companies has really stayed with them because returns on invested capital had been moving up. I think this is a bit of a shock to their system. And as you know, we are very focused on, more pure play future winners. I'm not saying the Mag 6 won't win. In many ways, they will. But they certainly, any company that is in the broad-based benchmarks and has risen to the top has gotten there because of past performance and a certain DNA that worked during the last 20 years or so. We think there's so much disruption happening now, technologically enabled disruption, some that will benefit, some that will not benefit the Mag 6. So we're much more focused on, the companies that are not as well known, but are going to benefit enormously from the year ahead and the years ahead. And I will say, last year, the market starting to broaden out away from the Mag 6. We outperformed. We're in the top 5%, I think, four of the top 5 ETFs by Morningstar. And even for the last 3 years, we're in the top 5%. So I think the market is beginning to understand what we've been trying to say.
All right. So did you guys hear that? Like she's basically centering her thesis around not well-known companies. So the hyperscalers, the Mag 7 or Mag 6, as she mentioned, they don't have a heavy allocation to them. She's looking for like the no names. So like small cap AI companies, right? Or things like that is probably, maybe mid cap is probably a better idea. But yeah, that's what she's betting on, right? She's betting on these smaller, unknown, not as known companies for those outsized gains, right? Because we already saw it happen in 2025, right? We saw that happen. Again, that MU example, Micron, I would have never guessed Micron. Like I remember seeing MU like back in January, February, looked at it, didn't really know too much about it. And then I just kind of wrote it off, right? I was getting into the high yield stuff right at that time. So I was like, Micron, why would I invest in this piece of crap, right? But hey, look at it now. Look at it now, right? It's 250% gain. But again, just coming back to that, could you look at these small caps, right? These not well-known, AI companies. Victor, I don't know if he's in the chat, but me and him were having a conversation. He dropped one interesting one. I'm not going to say it on this stream, but he did drop one or two very interesting, not well-known semiconductor companies. And I mean, those could potentially have outsized gains as we move into 2026. If the semiconductors continue to take off, which I mean, as a sector, something like an SMH is obviously doing well. But also, I thought it was interesting. These are her themes. We all know AI, right? AI, the software layer. Okay, robotics in space. That's an interesting theme for 2026. Again, ARC innovation usually is. They're trying to be at the forefront of everything. They had like the genome ETF, which I think they delisted. They had a couple other ETFs that they delisted or that they just merged into ARC-K. But robotics in space, energy is obviously going to be important. Power, right? If you need power to power the data centers, we always talk about this. Blockchain is another interesting one, right? For those who might be interested, you have Blocks, the Blocks ETF. That's the high yield income ETF. Product that's out there. But you also have Stacy, STCE, from Charles Schwab, right? That's more on the crypto space, right? Blockchain companies, that kind of deal. So for ARC to be, investing in this theme of blockchain technology, again, just interesting. This is usually at the forefront of stuff. And biology, right? So Tempest AI, I don't know too much about this company. I've heard about it, but Tempest AI is an AI company for healthcare, right? I don't know. Like I said, I don't know too much about it. I've seen the name. Everyone knows who Tesla is, Shopify, Robinhood. I've never heard of Beam, so they're new to me. AMD, Palantir, Coinbase, and Roku. Right, but Tempest AI is one that I haven't really heard of. I've seen things for CRISPR, again, Human Genome Project, that kind of stuff. But yeah, maybe healthcare is going to have it did fairly well, I guess, last year, if I'm not mistaken. So this year, with the advent of AI integration and things like that, Tempest AI could have some tailwinds. So. Just wanted to cover that because I always like to listen to Kathy Woods, even if sometimes, she's kind of off her rocker. I mean, I think she has Bitcoin at like some crazy price, like way out there. And I think she had Tesla at like, $1,000 a share last year or something, or 750. I don't know. She comes out with some really crazy, price targets, right? But if she's right, she looks like a genius, right? Everyone in a bull market looks like a genius. Okay, so moving on from that, let's see. I guess we're going to skip this. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but basically this is, Golden Dome related stuff. So in Greenland, we covered a lot of that. Okay, so Greenland is taken care of. Golden Dome project, if you guys don't know what that is, essentially the Golden Dome project is a large missile defense, initiative for the United States. Right. You have like Patriot missiles batteries that are placed all over the world. But what this is going to be more closer to home. And it's not just going to be a missile system, right? It's going to involve space. It's going to involve the space domain. It's going to involve probably naval, and it's probably going to have a ton of radar, a ton of, satellite, involvement aside from just missiles, right? Right now, this news hit last month. U.S. names 1,000 plus Golden Dome partners in first contracting stage. So if you guys don't know too much about contracting, essentially what it is the U.S. government creates a contract. They put it out to bid, right? They say what they're looking for. You probably have one master contract, and then you'll have like 100 or 200, 300, smaller contracts within that bigger contract. Okay, I used to do government contracting as a employee for a private company, so I know this stuff just kind of offhand. But yes, so essentially that contract goes out to bid, and then you're going to have all these private companies usually put in their orders, right? Put in their bids for these contracts. So last I saw in here, they were talking about, so it's called the SHIELD program. So SHIELD stands for Scalable Homeland Innovative Enterprise Layer Defense Program, an indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contract with a ceiling of up to $151 billion. That number is, I think, probably going to climb higher. But anyways, because if you know anything about government contracting, you know that contracting companies, they love to win contracts and then they love to say, well, hey, we actually need more money. So we'll see if this number inflates a little bit. What's another couple billion on the US debt, right? Just ask, the Federal Reserve to print it. It's okay. We got enough ink and paper. But anyways, it's going to be interesting to hear this, continue through the cycle, continue through news, seeing who's going to actually be a partner. I remember that Elon's companies, a couple of his companies were going to be named as part of the Golden Dome. I don't know if that's still the case because of, the rift that, Trump and Elon had over freaking Twitter or X. But you also have Palantir was named as one of the partners. Still don't know. I haven't heard any update on that, but they were, part of the front runners. And I think you also had Rocket Lab that was in there. Don't quote me on that. I thought I saw something saying that Rocket Lab was also in there. But you're going to have a ton of these partners, Lockheed Martin, the usual suspects, Lockheed Martin, L3 Harris. You're going to have probably General Dynamics in there. You're going to have a ton of these defense contractors in there. Raytheon, right? I think they renamed to like LX or something, RTX company. Yeah, but Raytheon's probably going to be in there. Raytheon makes missiles, in case you didn't know. So yeah, you're going to have the usual suspects, usual defense companies putting in their bids for these for this Golden Dome contract. So it's going to be really, really interesting to see what comes of this. All right, so I wanted to cover just these two ETFs very briefly. Again, I want to be respectful of your guys' time, and we're pretty much nearing the top of the hour. All right, so this is just, if you want that exposure to defense tech and you don't want to look for individual names, I'm going to show you a quick hack that you can use if you want to look for individual names. But two, you can also just buy the basket, right? Instead of looking for individual eggs, you can just buy the whole basket and call it a day, right? Shield has been pretty popular. I've seen it a lot on the YouTube space and in X, people talk about Shield. So we'll just take a quick little look at what Shield or how Shield has been doing. Let's take a look here. So for the 1 year, because of all the defense spending, it is up 91%, right? Not bad returns for just buying, basically defense tech. So the United States, NATO, everyone else is putting in a lot of money into defense, right? You have the Russia-Ukraine war still ongoing. That spooked a lot of NATO. NATO started ramping up their defense spending budgets. And now you also have, again, China-Taiwan, right? So that is a potential that could happen in the future. And, of course, the United States is moving. That's why the whole Greenland thing was a big deal. Now you have the Golden Dome, et cetera, et cetera. But defense spending has increased. Trump administration recently, and I've mentioned this all the time, but the Trump administration just talked about increasing the budget by another $500 billion for defense. So again, where's that money going to be going to? All right. So anyway, Shield has done pretty well, but here's the quick hack in case you guys want to know how to look for individual companies. Well, the fund managers already do it for you, right? They already do it for you. That's why they have these ETFs, especially with these thematic ETFs or sector ETFs. So you just look at the holdings, right? And like I mentioned, Lockheed Martin's in there. Rheinmetall's out of Germany, if I'm not mistaken. Raytheon's right here. General Dynamics, Palantir, L3 Harris, right? Bay Systems, I believe that's a UK company. Saab, which is crazy because they used to make cars, but now they make fighter jets. Northrop Grumman. So you have a ton of these companies, right? So you can always just look into them to see which ones you might like or what they're doing. Leidos. I've worked with Leidos people. I've worked with Raytheon people. What else we have in here? I don't know any of these. I've seen Parsons Corp. Yeah, they're around for sure. Let's see. Drone Shield. This one, really interesting. I'm just putting it out there. We talked about Ondas before. I used to be an investor in Ondas, no longer. But Drone Shield is like an Australian competitor. I haven't done enough DD on there. Again, shout out to the Victor for bringing them up because he was the one who did mention it to me. But Drone Shield, again, something interesting. Big Bear AI, which why? But Big Bear AI, if you just put AI in the name, you're good. Voyager Technologies, another one, right? That's part of the defense out there. Red Cat Holdings is another drone company. So again, if you're looking for like these conviction plays, you know, and you don't know where to start, well, just look at the ETFs. All right, look at the broad-based ETFs, the thematic ETFs, and just look at the holdings. And that's a quick hack on how to find, you know, probably some investing ideas. Okay, but yes, you know, let's just look at Shield real quick. So long-term growth catalyst, global defense spending rose 9.4%. Year over year to $2.7 trillion in 2024, the fastest annual increase since the end of the Cold War. Okay. Reimagining the defense industry, future-proofing advanced military systems is a top priority for the governments, and differentiated exposure, right? So if you're, you know, interested in just U.S. companies, I'm sure there's ETFs out there. But if you, again, want to hold the whole basket and you don't care what's in there, again, this ETF holds no China, right? This is ex-China, which in my opinion is probably a good thing. But here we go. You know, if you're in the United States and you want to invest in defense technology companies, you know, here it is. You know, we have 61% of this ETF dedicated to the largest players in the defense industry. Okay, so you have sectors, industry, capital goods, software, commercial, professional services, technology, hardware, and materials. All right. Another one, and this is off to Skeptic in the chat who's talked about this ETF. You have the Transatlantic Defense ETF. Okay, this one is specifically for NATO partners. Okay, so any companies that are operating within NATO countries, these are the companies that are going to be listed in this ETF. Okay. I thought it was an interesting thing. I don't think I don't know too much about it, honestly. I think it's interesting for sure. Like I just mentioned, NATO is beefing up their defense spending. Poland has been the best by far. And then you have Germany and, you know, France and everyone else starting to increase their defense spending. I think Donald Trump had mentioned at Davos that Spain was the only one that has not stepped up their defense spending. But let's take a look at this ETF real quick. I'm just interested in knowing the holdings and characteristics to see who's in here. So again, we have some of the usual suspects. You have RTX, GE, General Electric is in here. All right, Boeing is in here. Airbus. So Boeing is one of two of the largest airplane manufacturers out there. Airbus is the second. Okay, Airbus is based out of the UK, if I'm not mistaken. And then Boeing is obviously an American company with, you know, a very tumultuous past, right? People have fallen off buildings, you know, who've whistleblown. But anyways, you also have Rolls-Royce in here. You know, fun fact for those who don't know, Rolls-Royce used to actually make engines for the German, not the Germans, for the UK military, right? For their airplanes. And I believe they produce some engines for tanks as well, if I'm not mistaken. So Rolls-Royce is out there. You have Honeywell. They're, again, one of the more usual suspects. Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, Rheinmetall. So again, if you want to invest in a theme, and, you know, you're big on making a little bit of money over defense spending, you know, whether it's good or bad, or you're indifferent towards the actual, you know, what the money's going to be used for. Because, I mean, you're thinking national security, war, that kind of stuff. I mean, it does bring human misery. But if you want to make a couple bucks off of the defense of, you know, the Western world, this could be an ETF that fits into your portfolio. So just an interesting ETF. Again, shout out to Skeptic. So why NATO? The Themes Transatlantic Defense ETF seeks to track the selective transatlantic aerospace and defense index, which identifies aerospace and defense companies headquartered in the North Atlantic Treaty Organization member countries. So you guys can check this out if you're interested. Again, probably not something I would buy. One I do want to cover real fast before we get out of here is Rex Drones ETF. Okay, so if you're, again, bullish on drones being used for national security, defense, that kind of stuff, you could invest in DRNZ from Rex. Okay, I think this is actually a pretty interesting ETF. And, you know, you can see right here, well, you guys can't see because I need to zoom in here. We have the two top holdings, Ondas, AeroVironment, And you have Drone Shield right under there. They just updated this because the other day OnDesk was much lower. But you also have Red Cat Holdings in there as well, and Aero Group, right? I've seen this around. You also have Volatus Aerospace. So again, if you guys are looking for like these individual companies to invest into, you can always look at the ETF and then see what the holdings are, because that's just a quick hack, right? The ETF manager has already done all the work and found the companies for you. So now you just got to do your own kind of like due diligence. All right. So guys, I think that is pretty much it. I don't want to take up too much of your guys' time. Before we end the stream though, do you guys have any questions for me in the chat? You know, do you guys want to talk about anything? I have about, probably 10-15 minutes to spare if you guys want to chat it up. So going back through the chat, MJ Balhunter says the man literally lives out of the art of the deal. Yeah, he's referencing Trump when we're talking about Trump, strategic uncertainty, create the problem and then sell the solution. I said that he was going to do that, man. It was like the perfect play. He said, we're going to invade Greenland. We're going to take it by force, but then he necked out and said, you know what? We're not going to do that. Instead, how about I don't do tariffs, I won't invade, but you still give me mineral rights and you still let me put a couple things over there in Greenland, or as he called it, Iceland, or ice, right? So, I mean, dude, he got what he wanted either way, right? He should have just asked for it, right? I think NATO probably would have still gave it to him. He didn't have to do all this craziness, all this nonsense. He could have probably just asked for it and they would have probably said yes anyways, right? He started threatening with tariffs. Obviously, the market is still a little shell-shocked when it comes to the word tariff. Let's see. MJ Bowhunter also says, or Bowhunter, I should say, not Bow. Bowhunter says, I tend to lean towards what Tom Lee thinks for the market moves this year. I am as well. I like Tom Lee. Obviously, he's chairman of BMNR. So if I didn't like him, I wouldn't be in BMNR. But I also do like if you watch enough of his interviews, like I've watched a ton of his interviews. I mean, he's just a no nonsense kind of person. Yeah, some people would say that, he's too bullish on stuff, right? He's like a perma bull. But I mean, sometimes you need that. Sometimes you need that just to see that other perspective, because when there's a lot of doom, gloom, and nonsense out there, especially in the media, especially CNBC, especially YouTube, especially X, where everyone's, calling for recession, depression, World War III or V, and stock market to zero, Bitcoin to zero, Ethereum to zero. Sometimes you need that one voice that's going to just keep you invested and keep you from hitting that sell button. So, I mean, I like Tom Lee. I only recently started listening to him. And when I say recent, I mean within probably the last year, right? Before that, I never really listened to Tom Lee. I never even did a lot of this stuff that I'm doing now, like looking and actually paying attention to what's going on in the broader world, paying attention to what companies are doing and how they're positioning themselves. I never really did that. And that's another crazy thing. Like on YouTube, you can hear CEOs of these companies talk. Where in another time in history would you even be able to be in the same room, virtual room, as a CEO talking about this stuff, right? Or billionaires or wealthy people, right? So again, I always like to listen to what Jamie Dimon has to say, or someone like a Larry Fink, or there's the I can't remember his last name or his first name, but Schwartz. Yeah, Schwartz. He's the CEO of Blackstone. So you have Blackstone, BlackRock, all right, JP Morgan. I mean, these are very large companies, very large institutions, financial institutions, asset managers. And you get to hear exactly what they're thinking or what they're, what's going on in their world, right? So I like to always just take it as a data point and just listen in. Like on CNBC, we got to hear what, what's his name? Michael Sonnenfeld, the Tiger 21 founder, talk about. And he talked about that he surveyed his members. In order to be a member of Tiger 21, you need to have a net worth of 100 million, right? So he surveyed his people and he asked them, what are you buying? And, the survey results were, a lot of them were moving out of equities or reducing equity exposure, and they were going into, private equity, which most of us can't get access to unless you're a accredited investor. But private equity, you also have not only that, but they were moving into Bitcoin and gold. And you know, then you could hear another person, Paul Tudor Jones, who's one of the legendary, you know, investors out there as well, talk about his thesis. And you start connecting dots because he talked about this year, 2026, is going to be probably an inflation story, whether you believe that or not. But the winners are going to be gold and Bitcoin. So, you know, for your own thesis, for your own data points, now you also have to kind of listen to the bears in the bear cases for that and say why gold or Bitcoin wouldn't go up, so you can have kind of a better picture. But it's crazy, man, like how privileged we are right now that we can listen to anyone, you know, even myself. Like, you guys can listen to me, right? If you guys have channels, let me know, drop them down in the comments section. I'll definitely follow. All right. Skeptic says, when does ONS moon again? I don't think it's going to be mooning anytime soon. Again, what, you know, is ONS a $20 stock? Is it a $15 stock, right? You have to look at the valuation, how much revenue it's actually making, the contracts it's actually secured. I think it's done very well over the last year. It's definitely started to make money. It's getting out of the hole that it has, you know, but it's also diluted a ton of shares. But it was added to a lot of indexes, obviously, you know, funds like drones. So it's going to get that passive inflow. So, I mean, Ondas has a lot going for it. I'm curious what earnings is going to look like for Ondas. Andre says, amplify. Hey, Andre, welcome back. Before I get to Andre, comic book says, with our funky, unpredictable market environment, what are your top 2 or 3 against the grain contrarian investment ideas for 2026? I like this question, man. You always be coming with the great questions. You asked also, you know, what would be your 5 funds? So I like this question. A contrarian bet. Honestly, right now is peak fear for the AI bubble, right? AI bubble. So I'm still in there. Let's see what else. Bitcoin, obviously, because right now, again, there's still a lot of fear, peak fear for Bitcoin. So I mean, I guess you could call that a contrarian bet. I don't know of like another contrarian bet for this year or for a theme, right? Like I can't think of one. If we're looking at sectors, maybe real estate. So I've slowly started moving bearish on real estate, but I think REITs will probably have their year this year. I mean, they've been in a pretty bad bear market since 2022. Like they've been in a bear market since 2022. Like there's been no reprieve from that bear market for REITs. So I think, if anything, the biggest contrarian bet would definitely be for real estate, because commercial real estate has just been getting pummeled like crazy. And now if you look at like a broad index like VNQ, you know, the Vanguard Real Estate Index, you can see it for yourself. It's just, it has not been a very loved sector, right? But real assets might start making a comeback this year, right? I think real assets will have a big comeback this year, because it looks like real assets are going to be the benefactors of what's going on in government, right? Printing of the money, the debasement trade, if you're a believer of that. And, you know, just, you're going to want real assets that produce real cash flows, right? So something at least I think about. So Andre says, Amplify Funds just came out with a cybersecurity cover call ETF called Hacky. I saw that. I mean, cybersecurity is pretty hot. I know it was really, really hot in 23 going into 24. Like cybersecurity, CrowdStrike, you know, all those companies that deal with cybersecurity was all the rage. I don't know what it's going to look like, you know, this year, but that's pretty cool that they did come out with a cover call fund. And Skeptic says it's a 15% target. So let's take a look. Why not? So this looks interesting. This does look interesting. When I did look at it initially, I didn't really do any like deep dive. I didn't even read the product page. So yeah, so the target's 15%. Let's see what the holdings look like. Yeah, of course, CrowdStrike, Fortinet, yeah, Cloudflare, yep, F5. These are the usual suspects right here. I'm surprised about this one. Northrop Grumman, General Dynamics, yeah, they have their own like IT section. Actually, for those who don't know, General Dynamics, they produce something. They produce a very niche piece of hardware that the government relies on, and it basically, I'm not gonna say what it is. You can Google it. But anyways, yeah, you can Google it. It's public knowledge. But anyways, General Dynamics, they manufacture something called a TAC lane, right? And it's basically an encryption device, and they're the only ones that do it, right? They're the only ones that sell it. So they will always be a government contractor. Cisco Systems, of course. Palo Alto's hardware company, software for networking. F5 is more or less similar to like a Cloudflare. Yeah, Fortinet, of course. Yeah, I don't know Okta. I've never heard of them. I've seen the ticker, but I've never actually looked at them. So yeah, Broadcom. The reason why Broadcom's in here, we know Broadcom as a semiconductor company. Whoops. We know Broadcom as a semiconductor company, but what you may not know is that Broadcom is actually a bunch of companies that AVGO had absorbed, right? That Broadcom had absorbed. One of them was Symantec, right? Symantec's that old Norton antivirus thing, so they absorbed them at some time in the past. I forget how many years ago, but they've absorbed a couple of different companies into their holdings. So I'm not, unsurprised by them being as part of this and not just a pure play semiconductor fund. So, but yeah, hacking could be a theme. I think cybersecurity is a very thematic, sector. If you're really betting big on security, on cybersecurity. Let's see. Oh, so Andre says, yeah, and I see these two, ISBG and ISSB. So I saw those two also. Skeptic had dropped those into the Discord. I saw those come out, and they looked interesting. But man, they need to stop with this stuff. They need to really stop with this stuff, man. 2 asset ETFs, come on. Now they're just making crap up. But if it works, it works. For those who may not know, let's take a quick gander at them. ISSB ETF, yeah, the income stake, US stocks, and 1x Bitcoin premium. So that's what ISSB is. And then there's ISSG, right? ISSG. No, ISSBG. That's what it was. Yeah, Bitcoin and gold. Right. So Bitcoin and gold or Bitcoin and equities. So, the thing with the Bitcoin and the gold one is Bitcoin could drag that ETF down for a little while if you're comfortable with that underperformance. But this would be a really nice way of getting exposure to 2 assets without owning 2 ETFs. And then, of course, they do the balancing themselves. I don't know they're probably doing it at 50-50 in terms of weightings. But, again, gold is not like a super grower. It's not going to have these wild swings like a Bitcoin, right? It's not going to have 10-15% swings to the upside or downside, over a span of a day and a half, where Bitcoin probably can. But right now you have Bitcoin where it's in this funny space. It's is it a Bitcoin winner, or, is Bitcoin going to go up? Risk off environment. What's going to happen? Is Bitcoin going to go to zero? So there's always that conversation that's going on. So, it could potentially drag that ETF down. So, if you're comfortable with that, you could do that. I personally would like having 2 separate ETFs. For me, it's GLDM for gold. And I like having IBIT, right? Because I like to be able to control the weighting in my portfolio. But this just takes kind of the guesswork out of it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it is 9:19. I think that's going to do it for me. All right. I am probably going to go back to bed because I am running on a couple hours of sleep. And I'll wake up later. Maybe I'll finish off this coffee and then see if I can stay awake. But as always, I appreciate you guys joining me on the stream. As always, right? I appreciate you guys taking the time out of your busy lives to come chop it up with me. So with that being said, I hope you guys have a great night, a great rest of your morning, great rest of your evening, wherever you are in the world. And I will see you guys